Hi there and welcome. My name's Sean Purcell. I work with the ACCA as an expert tutor for the SBL exam, and in this video I want to provide information to help you approach the Strategic Business Leader exam in the most effective way possible. This session complements another video on how to analyse the pre-C material, and it's essential that in addition to following the guidance on this video, that you also watch that video as well. I've split the session into three distinct parts. In the first part, I'll focus on time management and I'll demonstrate through some simple to understand visuals how it's really very easy to fail your exam if you're not disciplined in your time management. I'll then show you how to develop a simple time budget to ensure that the answers you write align with the time that's available. Then in the second part of this session, I'll explain how to effectively read the exhibits and requirements using simple and easy to remember approach that works every time. Following that, I'll talk about explaining how to consolidate your effective time management and careful reading and planning to complete each task in your exam. And I'm going to demonstrate all of this using the September 2023 examination paper. So let's talk about time management and why it's really important. Since September 2023, the SBL exam has consisted of 3 tasks, and the marks in the September 2023 exam were split like I show here. And it's your job to try and get more than 50% in the overall exam so that you meet the required pass standard. It's also quite interesting to note that when we're answering exam questions, it's often the first 50% of the marks that are the easiest to achieve. So the latter 50 are more difficult, and this is demonstrated in the following diagram. So rather than you starting and finishing with what I would describe as maybe the same mark per minute, what tends to happen is that your score at the beginning of your answer is higher than it is at the end. So you look at the mark per minute score in the graph, you can see it's higher at the beginning of each task than it is at the end. Therefore, in my opinion, as an expert tutor, I would advise you to try and aim for 50% or more in each of the tasks. So we should try to get 50% in task 1, we should try to get 50% or more in task 2, and we should try to get 50% or more in task 3. And if you take that strategy, in my opinion, that's going to maximize your chances of getting over 50 in the overall exam. This might seem straightforward, but if you don't strictly manage your time, I'll demonstrate how your chances of passing can be seriously impacted. Let's now have a look at how students often answer task 1. And the red lines here represent the time which you should be leaving the task. So in this situation, the student gives a pretty good answer, but they don't finish task 1 when they should. And they spend a little bit longer, and that little bit longer is represented by the green line. So the problem with spending longer on answering task 1, which you can see from the graph where you are actually spending a bit longer, is actually scoring a lower mark per minute score, is that it delays when we start task 2. So here we can see you start task 2 later than your time budget dictates. What happens? Well, again, because of poor time management, you don't complete task 2 in the appropriate time, and you spend a little bit longer, which is represented again by the green line, which substantially takes more time away from our opportunity to answer task 3, which is now starting very late. the result of that is we have very little time at all to answer task 3, and we're unable or unlikely to be able to score many marks because we simply don't have enough time. So is that a big deal? Well, it is a very big deal, and I will show you how a student often behaves the way I've just described and what kind of score they are likely to get. So if we use the September 2023 exam to demonstrate the mark allocation, you'll see why this is a big deal. So answering task 1, they spent quite a lot of time on it and they maybe got 21 out of 32. Pretty good mark, it's well over 50%. So then they moved on to task 2, and in task 2 again they get over 50%, and let's say they get 21 out of 40, which is still great. We're still on target for passing, but because we didn't have enough time, it all goes wrong in task 3. We were panicking, we didn't know what to write, we couldn't write much, and basically we came away with 4 out of the 28 marks available. And that's pretty typical of a badly managed exam for time. So the problem is that the total mark out of 100 comes to 46, and sadly that's a fail, and we would have been far better trying to get 50% of task 1, task 2 and task 3, which would have enabled us to pass just over 50 rather than spending longer on task 1 and task 2, which got us a few more marks but not enough to pass. So hopefully that visual will stick in your mind, and going forward you're going to have strict time management. Also, if you're familiar with the last 20 years of examiners reports like I am, this is going to be a common thing that you will see in those reports. And poor time management is probably one of the main causes of student failure, particularly in the SBL exam, and therefore it's critical you get it right so you can maximize your marks. So if we think about lessons learned, the first lesson you have learned is you need to make sure you have a budget for mark allocation. So let's have a look how we can create a budget in more detail. So I'm going to now start to talk about how we create a time budget. Like pretty much everything else that needs management in life, it's highly likely that if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And the first thing you need to establish for your SBL exam is a plan of your time budget. And from September 2023, the revised SBL exam allows you 3 hours and 15 minutes to complete all of the tasks. The SBL exam will have 3 tasks that you need to complete. However, in order for you to do that, you need to do some reading and planning. And let's say that's going to take you approximately 35 minutes. What that's going to leave you with then is 160 minutes. So you know that the SBL exam has 80 technical marks and it has 20 professional skills marks. So we've taken the reading time of 35 minutes from our 195. That means that we have 160 minutes to deliver our answer. So if we were to calculate our mark per minute budget after reading and planning, we need to divide that 160 minutes not by 100 but by 80, because the professional skills marks take no time to acquire. And what that is going to leave us with is 2 minutes per mark. And when managing my time, I'm going to apply that to my questions. So say it was 10 marks, that's 20 minutes. And I would always write down in my planning my start and my finish time. It's really important that we do that to keep on track. So that would be how I would approach my time management. Let's see what I do on task 1. If we look at task 1 in the September 2023 exam, it had 2 main tasks. The first task required you to outline the problems caused by the previous leadership style and the impact the current CEO's leadership style has had on Courgettes' culture. In the pre-scene, it mentioned that Courgettes was originally founded by 2 entrepreneurs with their own entrepreneurial management style, and they've since retired, and the company has floated on the stock exchange, and this, coupled with information given in the new exhibit, would have assisted you in scoring pretty well in this question. The second part of task 1 asked you to prepare presentational slides explaining the role of Courgettes' NEDs and the importance of having a diverse board. So again, taking hints and leads from the pre-scene information, where it suggested you need to make sure that you were fully conversant with board structure and corporate governance when a company is listed on the stock exchange, that should have prepared you pretty well to answer the latter part of this question. So your timing budget for task 1 would have been 12 marks times 2, 24 minutes. Yep. And then for task B, same again, 12 marks times 2, 24 minutes, giving you a total of 48 minutes. So when you started it, you would write your start time, you would add 48 minutes to it, and then you would put in your finish time. Okay. If we look at task 2, this was split into 2 parts. The first part was asking us to look at the suitability, feasibility and acceptability of investing in an artificial intelligence, and the second part was asking you to draft an email discussing the nature of risks and discuss the consequence of each of these risks for Courgettes. So again, you need to create a timing budget. And for task 2A, it was 16 marks, you multiply by 2, that will give you 32 minutes. For task 2B, it was 6 marks times 2, which would give you 12 minutes. And then for task 2B part 2, that would be 20 minutes. Yep. So a simple time budget, again, leading to 64 minutes on task 2. And again, because you're disciplined, you write down your start and your finish time. Finally, if we look at task 3, this again broken into 2 parts. First bit asking you to assess the performance in the last financial year. And then the second part was asking for briefing notes outlining what should be included when reporting on environmental and sustainability issues. Yeah. Again, we have a timing plan. What does it look like? Task 3A was 16 marks times 2 is 32 minutes. Task 3B, 8 times 2 is 16, which gives us a total of 48 minutes. And again, as always, we write down our start and our finish times. So let's just check to demonstrate that we are properly budgeted here. Task 1 took us 48 minutes. Task 2 took us 64 minutes. Task 3 took us 48 minutes. We spent 35 minutes reading and planning. So the total of all of that comes to the total allocated time of 195 minutes or 3 hours, 15 minutes. Yep. If we manage our time like that, we will be in full control of our time management. Also, let me remind you what the examining team have said are also contributors to poor time management, and things that the examining team had also contributed to poor time management were, firstly, wasting time including lots of non-relevant information. For example, in the question on risk, in task 2, many students went into quite a lot of depth explaining the TARA framework. They got no marks. Yeah, they got no marks, and it took time away from answering other tasks. What else? it was also evident that some students were writing very elaborate and lengthy plans, and they took quite a lot of time to do, and really there's no real marks in that. So my advice would be professional, but keep it fairly simple. And then finally, people were repeating their points. The marker marks each task many times and know it inside out, and are very easily able to spot repetition. Again, it's wasting time. Okay, I just want to make one final point, that you may take a little bit longer or a little bit less in reading and planning. And in order for you to understand how long it actually takes you, you should be practicing mock exams on the ACCA CBE platform. Yep, and that might cause you to adjust your mark per minute a little bit lower or a little bit higher. Yep. So having now talked about time management, let's think of how we can effectively read and plan in the SBL exam. But remember, when reading and planning, we should think of our exam as a project management exercise in mark acquisition. Yep. So we have structure. Yeah, we've just explained the structure to timing. I'm going to now explain reading and planning. So to remind you, on the day of the exam, what are you going to get? Well, you're going to get a fresh copy of the pre-seen material, which you will have familiarized yourself with already. You're going to be given some additional and fresh exhibits, and you're going to be given 3 tasks which you are required to answer. And the first thing I want to talk about is the order in which we approach the material. And I would recommend that you deal with the information in the following way. All requirements in the SBL exam are compulsory, and I would advise that you answer tasks in the order which they are given. Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to do is briefly review the tasks, because if you just read the exhibits with no context, they're not going to mean much to you. So the first thing I'd recommend you do is briefly read each of the tasks, because if you just read the exhibits with no context, they won't mean much to you. Following your review of the tasks, then you want to review each of the exhibits and try and link them to which you think is the most relevant task. Also, when you're doing this, try to be interactive. Highlight, make a note. Yeah, it will make you pick out the points better. I'd also suggest that you read the requirements in the following way. Yeah, so you read the requirements once, you read the requirements twice, then you do a quick brainstorm of what you think are the main points, and maybe think about how many marks are available to create a rough plan. But before you jump in, read it one more time. Read it one more time, because the first 2 requirements, sometimes in an exam, we get tunnel vision and we see questions we want to see, not the ones that are actually asked. So having gone through read one, read twice, do our plan, we stepped out, then we step back in and read it again. And hopefully that will stop you having tunnel vision and be a bit more objective to make sure your plan is on the right track. So that's important that you do that, in my opinion. So now we've got a rough plan, we need to expand it. And I would say it's really useful on each of the tasks to ask the following questions. You want to be asking, what is your role? What is the format required? Who is the audience to which you are presenting? What's the verb saying? And how many marks are available? And what are the professional skills marks being awarded for? Yeah, it's really important to do this, because we should be clear what the professional skills marks are asking, and I would suggest you use them as a lens through which you structure your answer. Other things I'd recommend you look for would be, is there any chance to use academic models to help generate ideas? Yep. And I just want to make a quick point on academic models, because people sometimes ask me, should you include them in your answer? Well, I'd say they're a fantastic resource to help you generate ideas, but you should definitely not include them in your answer. Yep. Please do not include in your answer. It is not professional, and it's not how you do things in the workplace. And remember, your SBL exam is a practical workplace based exam. And if you talked about Porter's 5 forces or the like in the workplace, people would think of you as a bit weird. So just to kind of, reiterate that point, academic models are a great way to generate ideas and structure arguments, but you don't reveal them in your answers. Okay. Other things I would think about when planning, I would think about how many marks are needed. Do my points give enough marks? Yeah, always be thinking about that. It is about mark acquisition. I'm also going to be thinking about using subheadings. I'm going to be thinking about maybe white space. Yep, just helps the marker navigate between the points you are making and also differentiates your points. And I'd also say, be careful when presenting your answer to not waste a lot of time on over elaborate layout, making amazing fonts and subheadings and multiple conclusions, because there's probably not time and there's probably not a lot of marks for that. So just watch out for that. So having given you all of this advice, let's put this advice into practice and use it to create some high mark scoring answers and apply it to the tasks which we were asked in the September 2023 exam. To quickly remind you, task 1, 2 tasks, and the first task required you to outline the problems caused by the previous leadership style and the impact the current CEO's leadership style had on culture. And then the second part asks you to prepare presentational slides explaining the role of Courgette's NEDs and the importance of a diverse board. So let's have a look at a plan for 1A. The first thing we're going to think about is our role. We're a senior business analyst. The format is briefing notes and the audience is a chief people officer. Yeah. We think about the verb. It was about culture and impact, and it was mark allocation of 12 marks, and professional skills marks were for commercial acumen. Okay, so we've got that clear. So if we just go back to the first three, the role that we had in the September exam was common to all tasks. Briefing notes were required, and I'd just say acknowledge the request for briefing notes. And what would it look like? It's going to look something like this. Yeah, title briefing notes to the chief people officer from the business analyst, put today's date and just a quick subject. Yeah, that's all that you would need in terms of format and style. The verb was about outline and the impact. Mark allocations 12 and commercial acumen are the professional skills marks. Okay. So in planning our delivery, we need to be thinking about splitting our answer, maybe 50-50, half talking about the previous leadership style and the other half talking about the current leadership style. Yep. So there was 12 marks. So thinking 50-50, we're probably thinking 50%, 6 for that. And we are also going to make sure our answer is acknowledging the request for commercial acumen. Thinking about how we might generate ideas. We've got some information in the case, but Exhibit 1 gave us quite a lot of information. Another catalyst that might help you is on culture, the cultural web. Yep. And it just might give you a little bit more than you might get from just reading the scenario. Yeah, but as I said, we don't reveal our sources, but it could be useful in getting some ideas and also make sure that we talk about it in context. And we also are very, very aware when planning that we have to demonstrate an emphasis on commercial acumen. Okay, so as well as the cultural web, we did have quite a lot of information from Exhibit 1. It talked about the style, The key point I want to make when looking at Exhibit 1 though is it's about interpreting and explaining in your own words, and there are no marks. We're just quoting and copying directly from the exhibit. Yeah, no marks for that. So please, the ACCA use a term that's called synthesis, and so we're actually putting our own spin, and whilst putting our own spin we are getting across that we're thinking in as someone with commercial acumen. Yep, so I've done that. I'd give a quick time check, always checking my time to make sure I'm on budget, and then I move on to the second part of task 1, where we were asked to prepare slides and accompanying notes and explain the role of NEDs and the importance of having a diverse board. So how am I going to plan for this one? Well, what am I going to start with? I'm going to start with how I always start: my role, the format, the audience, the verb, the mark allocation, and the professional skills. Always do that. So just reminding myself about the first 3. In terms of the role was the same throughout the exam, but the format here was about slides. And if you're not aware of slide functionality on the ACCA CBE platform, please become familiar. Yep, it's really important to do that. Get onto the ACCA CBE platform, see what slides look like. And here we were talking again to the Chief People Officer. In terms of using slides, remember the marks are going to be scored in the comments, yep, or the notes. So you do a bullet point, and then your notes, your comments related to the bullet point is where you score the marks. And just make sure that the bullet point you make on the slide is linked to the note. So the subheading in the note is the same as the bullet point, and you expand that, and that's where you get the marks. Okay. So in terms of planning this, explain and assess. We need to explain and assess. There's 12 marks. So we, again, splitting our answer to each of the requirements about half and half, about 6 marks each. Yep. However, if you do not present in a slide format, because the professional skills marks are here for communication skills, you're in danger of losing all of them. Also, you need to make sure the notes that you give on the slide are reflective of the marking scheme. So if we're going for about 6 marks, we need, well, a maximum of 6 marks and no more, and the same on the importance of a diverse board. Is there any catalyst for ideas here? Well, I think it's a fairly standard set of information to answer this question that you would have acquired from your studies. However, we're not just regurgitating our textbook on the role of NEDs, and we need to make sure that we tailor our answer in the context of courgettes. And similarly with the importance of diverse boards, really important that you make sure you are wording your answer in the context of the case. So again, don't forget a quick time check, and then we move on to task 2. So this was split into 2 parts, and it asks you to prepare a report assessing the suitability, feasibility of a proposal to invest in artificial intelligence, and professional skills were awarded for skepticism. Yep. Interesting to note on this question that there wasn't really anything in the pre-seen information on artificial intelligence, and it was just given on the day of the exam. So that shows that SBL will still require you to think on your feet using information provided on the exam day. So let's have a go at planning. So in terms of plan, what's my role? What's the format? Who's the audience? What's the verb? How many marks? And professional skills for skepticism. Yep, so quite a lot of marks to plan for there in 16. So let's go and look at those in a bit more detail. The role is the same. The format was a report. And with regards to the format of a report, any reasonable professional approach to writing a report will be fine. And we're talking to the CFO, and a report looking like this, maybe do a conclusion, maybe an introduction as well. That would be fine. And again, be careful not to be over elaborate, wasting time. In terms of considering the verb, it's about we have to assess suitability, feasibility and acceptability, and we need to get 16 marks, and we need to show skepticism. Okay, so how am I going to plan that? Well, to ensure I get 16 marks, I'd suggest you try and get a balance maybe between your suitability, feasibility and acceptability, although the marking scheme will be quite flexible. Go for about a third, roughly. So 16 marks, what are we going to do? We are trying to get a balance. Is there a catalyst for ideas? Well, hopefully there is. And I think if it doesn't come to you instantly, you should have read an article on the ACCA website on the strategic planning process. I wrote that article. There's a strategic planning process part 1 and part 2, and it gives you a really useful framework how to address strategy questions. And in that article, if you look at it, I'll just summarize it. When I'm looking at suitability, I'm thinking about, does it complement the SWOT? Does it build on our strengths? Does it minimize exposure to our weaknesses? Does it seize opportunities? Does it avoid any threats? All of this in the context of core jets. And then when I think about, well, is what's on the table feasible? I think about the 6 M's. I think about M for money. Are there any financial issues? I think about manpower. Do they have the skills? Do they have the staff? Think about materials. Do they have the resources needed? Can we get access to those materials? Machinery in the context of core jets is probably related to aircraft. So, do they have them in terms of the market? Is there capacity within the market? And then makeup, I'm thinking about cultural issues and structural issues. Yep, so quite a lot to get there. And then when I'm thinking about acceptability, I'm thinking about to whom does it have to be acceptable, and that will be the key stakeholders. So I'm going to be looking at Mendelow's matrix. I'm going to be looking at the key players, but we don't just regurgitate this, we put it in the context of core jets. Yep. And all of our argument is going to be filtered through skepticism. And when we act in a skeptical manner, we don't take things at face value. We question the rationale behind some of the assumptions. And really important to make sure we do that. That's what we need to do. So as a quick summary, when we have an evaluation to do, is it feasible? Is it suitable? Is it acceptable? All wrapped up in skepticism, delivered to get at least over half of those 16 marks and hopefully a little bit more. Okay. In the second part, I asked you to draft an email discussing the nature of core jets' risk and assess the consequences of each of these risks to core jets. If you read the pre-scene, which I'm sure you did, you would have paid attention to the risks in the context of the airline industry. And as a result, your ability to deal with this would have been massively improved. So again, if you are not that comfortable with how to deal with the pre-scene, watch the other video I have recorded on this. So let's think about a plan. How would we plan for 2B? It's going to look the same as it does every time, to be honest. I'm going to think about role, format, audience. I'm going to think about verb. I'm going to think about mark allocation. And I'm going to look at what are the professional skills being awarded for. So the role here, it's the same. I'm a business analyst. What does an email look like? Hopefully you know that. Just think about what you do in the workplace. And again, we're talking to the CFO. Your email is probably going to look something like that. In terms of a plan, the verb asks us to discuss and assess. We get 6 marks for the first bit, 10 marks for the second bit, and professional skills for evaluation. So always just checking so I don't go off course. Really important that we do that. I think if I was looking at some catalysts that would help me generate more marks here, I think your familiarity with risk from your studies would have helped you, and you also needed to give a balanced argument in this situation because evaluation skills were for the professional skills marks, so make sure you do that. But you know, if you look at the examiner's report, a lot of people let themselves down by not reading the requirements and answering a question they wanted to ask. So if you think back to when I said read it once, read it twice, brainstorm, mark, focus, that would have stopped you doing that, but sadly many students didn't. Okay, what do? I do a quick time check. What's the time looking like? I'm on track. Okay, let's move on to task 3. This again broken into 2 parts. First part asking you to assess the performance in the last final last financial year. In the pre-scene, we got a lot of airline-specific key performance indicators. Also, so we had an opportunity to familiarise ourselves with them. There was also headline results and cost breakdowns. If you look in the last page of the pre-scene, you'll find them there. But if we're going to answer this question well, we needed to do more than just work the numbers. And normally you have to, use those numbers, with anything in the pre-scene. And the examiner's report again said students weren't developing their answers enough. They were just kind of, doing a calculation. And if you just worked the figures, very few marks available. In the second part of task 3, you're asked to talk about the typical content you would find in an annual environmental and sustainability report. And again, we would have had our attention drawn to this in the pre-scene, as it did talk about sustainable behaviour being a key value, and considered maybe KPIs for all those values and sustainability. That would have prepared you really well. So let's have a think about a plan. Okay, as always, role, format, audience, verb, mark allocation and professional skills is what we do every time. In terms of the first bit, we were the business analyst, as we always were. The format was a report, the audience was the CFO. You're going to look something like that, to, from, date, maybe an intro, maybe a slight conclusion. What else? Well, assess the performance. 16 marks, so a bit of planning here, and make sure we do it in the context of analysis professional skills. So a lot of the information provided in the pre-scene on the KPIs would have helped us. So in terms of my plan, 16 marks, the reasons for and implications of, and not that it's just gone up and gone down. You had to do more than that. And review the examiner's report here. Sorry, we get all this information from Exhibit 4 as well. So 16 marks requires quite a structured and logical approach. Let's have a think about how we would do that. Let's have a think about a plan. Are there any catalysts that can help me here? Well, I think really we have to contextualize everything in the context of Exhibit 4. We didn't have to bring much. We were just analysing what was going on. We were inspired a little bit by some of the indicators in the pre-scene, and that would be fine. I think we would have done okay. Finishing 3A, I'm thinking, how's my time going? It's going okay? Okay, let's go on to the second part, where we were asked to talk about typical content we would find in a report on environmental and sustainability. So again, a plan for this: role, format, audience, verb, mark allocation and professional skills marks. Same role, briefing notes, and the audience was a CFO. What do briefing notes look like? Well, there's no standard format, but just acknowledge the request. Title briefing notes, to, from, date, subject. What am I going to include? Well, I was asked to outline 8 marks. And in terms of professional skills, there weren't any professional skills on this part of the question. So role with a business analyst, it's briefing notes, the audience is a CFO. Briefing notes are fine looking like that. Just acknowledge the request. There's no one standard format. Title briefing notes, to, from, date, subject. In terms of my plan, the verb was outline, mark allocation 8. There wasn't any professional skills. So what could go in? Well, lots of things could go in here really, and I'm hoping you could have got 8 nice points with white space. Maybe you could have developed some points a bit more. But to answer this question, I think it would really, where the catalyst for ideas is going to come from. I think if you were familiar with how real companies do it, and you've read annual reports on, big businesses, that would have provided you with lots of inspiration to get a really good score on that. So hopefully you've done that. What big PLCs do in terms of what their sustainability and environmental behavior is, and you contextualized it in an airline business, you would have done great. So that concludes our review of how we would apply. But let's just remind you what we've learned here. What have we learnt? Well, the key things I hope you've learnt is you need to be disciplined. Yeah, and relentlessly I went through role, format, marks. Yep. We also were very strict on a time budget. We wrote down start and finish each time. We tried to make sure that enabled us to get the first 50% of all of the tasks. If we do that, in my opinion, that will enable you to easily get 50% in the exam. What else? We didn't just put a kind of random point down. Our points were contextualized in an airline business. And when we were making our points, we didn't just make a point. We thought about, so what? What's the consequence of what I've just said? We thought about why. Yeah, that can hopefully move your 1 mark point up to 2. And most importantly is we help the marker give us marks. We do that by presenting our answer in an easy to follow way. It's easy to follow because of our subheadings, because of our white space. Yep, make it easy for the marker. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you found the information useful, and please make sure you follow it carefully. And I'd like to wish you all the very best of luck with your exam and all the very best in your future career. Thank you very much.